And as I look around me and I start to see, we have to sing hymns every morning, there was communion every few weeks, and I started to question it and think, why is it that people are doing this? What is the reason that they feel compelled to go and do this? Do they even know? So I started to ask people, do you know that God exists? Can you prove that Jesus was the Son of God? What about the Bible? Do you know that it's right? And the response I got every time was either detention or you can't ask these questions. You just have to believe in it. God says it, you just have to believe in it. And I thought, well, wait. If you've got no proof for it, if you don't know that this is true, then why are you following it? Why are you, I thought, wasting your time on these things? So age 11, I became an atheist. I thought, these people, they don't know what they're talking about. And I thought I was so smart, because I'd figured it out and they were still ignorant. So then I spent the rest of my teenage years and my college years and early uni telling people that they were wrong. That God doesn't exist, there's nothing out there. There's no such thing as right or wrong. You do what you want. Because if God's not there, there's no heaven or hell. There's no criteria for what's right or what's wrong. And that was the way I lived my life. And I'll tell you, brothers, if you grow up as a teenager with no definition of right or wrong, you do whatever you want. You do whatever you want, because who's there to account you? Somebody, my mum or dad, they'd say something to me. Who are you? There's no such thing as right or wrong. How can you tell me that I'm wrong? Saw me in a bit of a state, and he said, are you okay? You look a bit down. And I just said to him, just casually, I just said, look, I've been thinking recently, is there more to life than what I used to believe? And his eyes lit up when I said this. And he said, you mean, does God exist? And I didn't mean, does God exist? But he said, do you mean, and I thought, well, I said to him, well, not really, but I'm willing to discuss it. And he said, okay. He said, let's sit down. So we sat down in one of the little break rooms, and he said to me, he said, look, and I'll never forget this. He said, look, if we start discussing this, before we do that, I need you to buy in on something. And he said, if I prove to you that God exists, what does that mean? And I said, I thought, this guy's never going to prove that God exists. So he said, if I prove, what does it mean? I said, okay, if you can prove it, that means I have a creator. That means right and wrong exist. Heaven and hell exist. That means I'm accountable for my actions and that I have a purpose. And he said, okay. He said, if you prove to me that God doesn't exist, I'll stop being a Muslim. I thought, all right, okay. Great. So he said, we won't discuss in work. He said, we'll meet outside of work and we'll chat about it there. So we did that Friday. We met up, we exchanged numbers, met up outside of work, this little restaurant, and he brought two other brothers along. And we started chatting about basically, where did I come from? Why am I here? And he said, this was the question that was put to me, where do you think you came from? I thought, easy, I came from my mum and my dad. He said, okay, where did they come from? My grandma and my granddad, where did they come from? Okay, we came from the monkeys. This is what I was thinking at the time. We came from monkeys, evolution, so on and so forth. Now I thought, okay, I'll just throw them with the evolution argument. They didn't even entertain the evolution discussion. They said, okay, let's assume, for argument's sake, that even if there was such a thing as evolution, what starts that? The Big Bang starts that. Okay, what starts that? Now, the subject of where everything came from, what started the universe and creation, they don't really have an answer for that. For years and years and years they said it was the Big Bang that started it. But even now, today, scientists are saying themselves, admitting that, look, an explosion, a bang, is a reaction to something else. It's a reaction. So something has to have come before. Therefore, that wasn't the start. There was something prior to that. So I went away and I started looking into this. And the principal explanation they use, that they have various ones, and they try to use science to answer it, is that, look, matter collides with antimatter, and you have an explosion, and that's the Big Bang. And because matter is 1 and antimatter is 0, the universe came from nothing, because 1 times 0 is nothing. Now I saw that and I thought, right, look, that's a very clever bit of science. That's really clever, whoever thought of that. But then what struck me is that, look, brothers, if we were to go outside now, we'd be crazy to do it because it's snowing, but if we were to go outside now and say, right, let's have a game of football, would we sit around and say, right, look, the ball goes into the net once, that's 1 goal. It goes into the net twice, that's 2 goals. If you tackle him and break his leg, that's a foul, it's a red card. Offside, none of us really know what that is, but offside, would we start going through the rules and explaining them? No, we wouldn't. Why? Because we already know them. We already know the rules to football. Now, if matter collides with antimatter and then there's a Big Bang and that creates the universe, what that means is that the rules of the universe were in place before the universe existed, which isn't possible. Who wrote the rules? They have to have been decided by something else. So, on that premise, you understand that, look, this can't have been the beginning, there has to be something prior to that. And you can keep going and going and going, that, look, whatever created this thing, created by this thing, created by and you just go on and on and on, until you come to a realization that, look, whatever came at the beginning, whatever started it all, by definition can't have been created by something else. Because if it was, then it wasn't the start. So the premise that you take that argument on then is that, look, if this thing that came at the beginning wasn't created by anything else, there are only 2 explanations. Number 1, it created itself, which is ridiculous. You can't decide to create yourself if you don't exist. And just like if you're asleep, you can't decide, right, I'm going to wake up now. It's not possible. You're not in control. So you can't create yourself, which means there's only one possible explanation. This thing was there all along. It didn't have another creator. It didn't create itself. The only explanation is that it was always there. No beginning, no end. So when you realize this, you think, okay, it was there all along. There's a few things you can work out about that. If it's there all along, that means it never got old. It doesn't get hungry. It has no weakness or flaw. Remember, I'm not calling it God at this point. I'm just saying there's something. There's a something out there. It doesn't have any weaknesses. It doesn't get old. If the universe is based on rules, this thing came first, which means it obeyed no other rule. It decided to create everything else. It has a will of its own. Intelligence. Not only that, but if it's there all along, then it's infinite. It has no bounds. There can't be more than one of it. Because if you say that there's 2 infinite things, then they can only be as big as each other. There's a limit on that. So there can only possibly be one. So now, okay, 1, it's flawless, it's infinite, it's got a will of its own, it created everything. Kind of sounds like God now. So we started to discuss the Quran. Now, I didn't know much about it at the time, other than the basics. It was the holy text of Islam and so on and so forth. And looking into the Quran, I find that it's not a book, it's a series of verses. A series of verses that were revealed in Arabic, that were spoken from the mouth of a man, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who couldn't even read. He was unlettered. And the things that this book discusses, the language that it uses, is so powerful and so eloquent, and yet so precise and straight to the point. And what is the Quran essentially? That it's not just a series of stories. The Quran is what? It's a book of law. Have you ever taken a book of law, of British law, off the shelf and start reading it? It's not like the Quran, even in English. It's official paragraph 1.2.3. The plaintiff says da 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 da. It's like that. It's really official language. Do not go through a red light until it turns green and da 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 da. But the Quran, a book of law, isn't like this. The language within it is so powerful. And this book is revealed at a time when the Arabic language itself was pretty much at its apex. There were, as we know, there were poets in Mecca and Medina at the time who could speak the most eloquent Arabic, tell the most fantastic stories. And one of the signs that the Quraysh used to try and show that they were number one was that they had the best poets. And they actually used to send them to challenge Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Quran issued to these men a challenge, because as we know, a lot of people tried to refute the Quran. It said, look, the challenge was shortened and shortened, and we're short on time, so I'll give the essential version. But the Quran said, look, if you disbelieve, it's in Surah Baqarah, if you don't think this book is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then all you have to do is create a surah like what's in this book. Just one chapter like what you see in this book. Because if somebody else can do it, that means it came from a man. If no one else can do it, that means it must have come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now I thought, okay, that's interesting. I wonder if anybody managed it. I look into it. Of course, nobody did. There were many challengers who attempted it, but nobody did. That was back then. How about more recently? And so if any of the brothers are familiar with Orientalism and some of the movements that took place when the British Empire and some of the colonial powers went into the Muslim world, what they tried to do was to cut the Muslims' relationship with the Quran. And the way they tried to do this was to meet this challenge, to disprove the Quran. So there are entire institutes that were set up to refute the language of the Quran and imitate it. None of them could do it. There were professors who were paid hundreds of thousands of pounds. They became Muslim because they couldn't do it. Why haven't I accepted it? So I went and I found the brother and I said, look, I think I'm ready. And the Friday after that was when I took my shahada, alhamdulillah. The feeling of becoming Muslim, from coming out of kufr and into Islam, is not something that, as I'm sure the brothers on stage will agree, is not something you can describe. That already when you take your shahada, you've had a shower already, you're clean, you're pure, your clothes are completely clean. But that's nothing compared to when you actually say those words and the entire weight of the world is lifted from your shoulders, never to come back again. Now, when that happened, I'd never felt anything like that, and I literally couldn't believe how I felt. That I felt as though I'd never been a non-Muslim, and I still have that feeling today. I can't actually remember how it felt to be a non-Muslim. I feel like I've been Muslim my entire life. Moved back in with my parents, and slowly but surely the relationship improved to the point, brothers, where it's now better than it ever was with my parents, that they see how much more reliable, how much more trustworthy I am, to the point that I recently brought my arm. I've still got the sling here, brothers. I took it off to do the talk. That I brought my arm about 6 weeks ago. My mum, bless her, has taken me every single Friday to and from the masjid for Jummah. The same mother who, they haven't embraced Islam yet. Inshallah, if brothers and sisters can make dua, that's all I ask. But look how that's changed, because I knew confidently that Islam has to be true.